Final Fantasy IX, a fan-made retelling. Chapter 1, Alexandria. I want to be your canary. Lightning crashed upon the dull sky like the crack of a whip, illuminating the squall about a lone boat being tossed mercilessly on the ocean waves. Like a twirling leaf in a hurricane, the small boat groaned, the sail giving way to the belligerent storm. Pressed against the curve of the boat lay a small girl, swathed in a damp cloak. Her dark hair, plastered to her pale cheeks, offered little protection from the biting wind. Through the aching numbness in her toes, she could scarcely tuck her feet under her tiny body, violently shaking. Her nose and eyes burned from the sea salt, and the coppery taste of blood ripened in her mouth over the dryness in her throat. Before her, a woman with flowing dark hair pulled back roughly on the ropes of their raft. The waves, like a terrible leviathan wrought with rage, threatened to swallow them. She glanced back at the younger girl, a visceral fear showing in her wide eyes. In that instant, gravity gave way as the boat was catapulted into the air, and for a moment, they seemed weightless. Princess Garnet woke abruptly with a gasp, instinctively catching herself from falling on a nearby windowsill. She shook her head, disoriented, her heart pounding. The warm morning sun greeted her, in stark contrast to the dream, which had seemed so real only moments before. She remembered then where she was, safely in her bedroom within the royal castle of Alexandria.
Again,
she thought, staring at the floor.
How many times now have I had that dream?
She found herself seated in her vanity chair, pushed against the wall near an open window as a gentle breeze drifted into the room. She rubbed her eyes with the back of her hands.
I must have fallen asleep here somehow,
she mused. A small flock of birds sang as they glided through the sky outside her window, inviting her back to the present. She stood, delicately parting the curtains to peer down from her tower. The beautiful, bustling kingdom below was painted in the rich, golden hues of a pleasant summer's morning. Alexandria stood proudly on a vista of cliff tops, over which rushed 3 glistening waterfalls, encircled by mountains and a clear blue lake. The various houses and shops below were decorated with a plethora of colorful banners. Clay rooftops, crooked clock towers, and winding stone staircases were thematically sprawled across the kingdom. The castle itself, the very epicenter of Alexandria, was a mass of pearly white facades, dominating the skyline with its impossibly vast centerpiece, a pillar of shining crystal which thrust skyward like a sword, piercing the heavens. Channels of water swept from behind the castle through the heart of the town below before disappearing over the foggy horizon beyond the grand cliffside. Spoken in whispers, like a breath on the wind. The princess often dreamt of fleeting voices and places she had never been. In the quiet hours of night, in the precious moments between waking and sleeping, she'd had visions of Gaia, the world, as vivid as a memory, but always just beyond the edge of perception. A stone mermaid danced elegantly on a sea of clouds latched to a ship's prow. Behind her loomed the hulking silhouette of the Prima Vista, the luxury liner airship of the Tantalus Theater Troupe. Its propellers beat with a low hum as it glided effortlessly through the sky. With its pointed roofs and circular glass towers, the ship itself appeared much like a castle. Inside the ship, a young man, small of stature, slid down a steel pole from the storage unit above him, the metal buckles on his Balerio vest clanking as he dropped to the floor below. He carelessly tossed his hair, for of the haphazard blonde mane that framed his face, half of it would inevitably fall from the loose hair ribbon he fastened by the nape of his neck. His peculiar simian tail swished playfully behind him as he sauntered down the hall. The shy glow of oil lamps lining the walls lent scant visibility. A throng of broken set pieces and instruments littered the hallway. The ceiling was missing beams, and large cracks showed in the wood. It was badly in need of repair. From the shadows, a door appeared at his right. The boy threw open the door and slipped into the room.
Sure is dark.
He spoke into the void. Silence answered him.
Guess nobody's here yet.
He stepped forward, his hands outstretched as he blindly groped the air. He felt the edge of a carpet meet with his boot.
Ah, there it is,
he thought, pulling a box of matches from his side pocket. He struck a match, and it sparked to life, emanating a feeble amber glow. He held the flame close, walking until he reached a small, round end table with a candelabra upon it. The room slowly grew brighter as he lit the candles. He heard footsteps behind him, followed by a familiar voice calling from behind the wall.
Who's there?
The boy turned on his heel, swiftly dousing the match's flame.
It's me! Zidane!
He answered. The door creaked open, and 3 of his comrades stepped into the room. To his left stood Blank, a man only slightly taller than he, with deep red hair held up by a thick leather headband. So thick, in fact, that his eyes could scarcely be seen beneath it. His body, while lean and toned, was also riddled with a patchwork of stitches and burn scars, part of which covered half of his face. To the right of Blank was Cinna, a strange-looking fellow with pointed ears, a bulbous red nose, and a beard which stretched from his upper lip to under his jaw in a complete U-shape. Lastly, Marcus stood to the side of Cinna. A bandana was pushed too far over his heavy brow, accentuating his fanged underbite and broad, tattooed shoulders. He rather resembled a troll.
Right, Zidane? You sure are late.
Blank chided, a hint of playfulness in his voice. Zidane chuckled, hooking his thumbs over his pockets.
Sorry. So, where's the boss?
I don't know. He ain't there yet.
Cinna answered. As if on cue, the door behind Zidane swung open, and an enormous figure, its face obscured by a blue dragon mask, lumbered into the room, brandishing a blade. Reflexively, the troop swooped in to attack the intruder. Blank brought his weapon down upon the intruder's head, splitting the wooden mask he wore in two, revealing their boss, Baku, from underneath. He held his head, seeming stunned by the impact.
Ugh, my head! Go easy, you guys!
He howled. The 4 troop members staggered back, appearing slightly winded. Baku, a squat fortress of a man sporting a lurid rosy beard and aviator goggles, adjusted his belt and gloves. A teasing grin stretched across his porcine face.
Hey, fools!
Baku walked over to Zidane and smacked him roughly on the back, nearly costing him his footing.
You're looking a lot better.
He commented, laughing to himself as he strode over to the door opposite the entrance. He cleared his throat, wiggling his pig-like snout.
All right, let's get this started already.
He kicked the door open, leading the party into the next room. The meeting room held a single oil lantern, a round table, and a few chairs, surrounded by clutter and engine pipes. Zidane took his seat, flipping his chair around to straddle the backside. On the table sat a model-sized replica of Alexandria Castle. Baku slammed his hands down on the table, shaking the model and leaning forward as he spoke.
Here's the plan. Tantalus, the most infamous band at Dare and Thieves. You lot, supposedly, are heading for the Kingdom of Alexandria.
He waved a crudely made ragdoll over the miniature castle.
Our mission? To kidnap the heir to the throne, Princess Garnet.
Cinna stood up from his seat behind Zidane.
I'll take it from here, so listen up. Our ship's about to dock at Alexandria, and when it does, we're gonna put on our costumes and perform I Want to Be Your Canary, the most popular play in Alexandria.
He nudged Marcus.
Break a leg, Marcus, cause you're playing the lead.
Is that me, is it?
That's right, you leave the acting to me, boys. Of course, the real kidnappers will be Blank and Zidane.
Marcus boasted.
I'll distract the audience from backstage with these little buggers.
Blank said, sliding a glass jar off of a shelf beside him and holding it out before the troupe. Inside the jar were a collection of large-eyed insects. They made an obnoxious chirping sound as they hopped within their confined space.
Ugh, I can't stand oglops. But I'll manage, so don't worry about me.
Blank grumbled in disgust. He set the jar back on the shelf.
And that will be your cue, Zidane.
Zidane grinned, his tail curling mischievously behind him.
Okay, so that's when I kidnapped Queen Braun, right?
You bet.
Baku answered.
You're gonna kidnap the fat-ass, butt-ugly Queen
The wrinkles on his face deepened. He cleared his throat, scowling at the smirking monkey boy from across the table.
What am I saying? Zidane, you sure think you're clever, don't you, boy?
Zidane's smile widened.
You're right. I think I'll take the much prettier Princess Garnet instead.
That's right.
Baku answered.
You're gonna kidnap the most babylicious beauty in all of Alexandria. The Princess Garnet herself.
While on board the Prima Vista, the Tantalus troupe continued their schemes. Far below, on the winding roads of Alexandria, teetered a very small and clumsy individual wearing a pointed, wide-brimmed hat. He gathered his bearings, having just tripped on his own feet and fallen face first on the busy walkway. "Ow," he muttered, dusting himself off. His blue linen jacket and striped balloon pants appeared slightly ragged, the fabric on the knees nearly giving way, the cuffs nicked with dirt. Beneath a steepled hat shone his eyes, 2 shimmering beads of ornate light, shrouded by a face like a drop of night sky. Around these parts, however, a boy as odd as this passed easily in a crowd. Suddenly, a gargantuan shadow enveloped him, and a thunderous booming loomed close overhead. Huh? He looked up. Where the sky had been just a moment before, now loomed the sizable underbelly of the Prima Vista, gliding low over the buildings.
Here!
Came a small voice from beside him, breaking him from his trance. It was a little girl with rosy cheeks, her hair in twin tails, like floppy rabbit ears perched upon her head.
You dropped your ticket.
The boy reached for the ticket which the girl held out to him. She smiled merrily and called a cheery
Goodbye!
before skipping away. Timidly, the boy trotted after her as people hurried by him through the archway up ahead. However, at that very moment, someone crashed right into him. He stumbled, almost flattening on the ground again.
Why, you... Get out of my way!
Came a snobbish voice from behind him. Another boy, no taller than he, with the appearance of a tawny rat in red overalls, darted out in front of him and disappeared around the street bend. The boy in the pointed hat waddled to a ticket booth up just ahead. From behind the woven drapery, the ticket master appeared. A plump fellow with tired eyes and a long snout from which hung a row of pointed teeth beneath a cluster of whiskers.
Can I help you, son?
His voice came, gruff but friendly. The boy hastily pulled the ticket from his coat pocket.
What's this?
The ticket master said, craning his neck over the tall booth counter for a better look.
There's something odd about this ticket. Why, it's another fake. I've seen so many today.
No, the boy whimpered, feeling his chest ache as he swelled with dismay. He had been so hopeful when he had finally been able to get this ticket. But this was terrible news.
Now, don't cry.
Came the ticket master's voice, softer this time.
I know how you must feel. Here, I'll give you these. Do try to cheer up now.
The boy looked up through misty eyes at the large hand that extended to him from over the counter. Curiously, he reached for the handful of cards the man offered. They were playing cards. He had heard that some people used them in duels.
Those can be really useful if you know how to play them. Oh, if you can find him, a person by the name of Alleyway Jack should be able to help you. This is the most I can do. Good luck, lad.
Swiftly, the boy thanked the ticket master for his kindness and turned. He ambled down the street, his new cards clutched to his chest, wondering what he should do now. Maybe he should just enjoy the scenery of Alexandria. After all, even if he weren't able to see the performance he came for, this kingdom was still quite famous and lively. Beside him, a group of children played jump rope, while the merchant sold hats to passers-by on the corner. Amongst all of the noise and the colors of the crowded town square, a daunting dark alleyway caught his eye. He felt afraid of it, of what he could not see beyond the shadows, but still, some strange force beckoned him towards it.
What about that alleyway person the Ticketmaster told me about? Alleyway Jack,
he thought to himself, staring at the cards as he walked. Too distracted to notice, he tripped on a misplaced cobblestone, hurtling face first to the ground. Boomed an angry voice. The boy peered up at a hippo-like man who stood atop a wooden ladder, glaring down at him disapprovingly. He huffed loudly, stomping down the ladder, his belt of tools clanking.
Hey! You made me miss, you little klutz!
He continued, shaking his fist roughly in the air. The boy began to stammer out an apology as he clambered to his feet, fixing his hat. But the man had already repositioned the ladder and returned to his work. He stared up at him, dumbfounded. A few whacks later, the angry worker wiped his brow and grumbled something to himself about finishing his day's work before climbing down from his perch again and storming away. The boy, now alone in the dark alley, fidgeted with the small golden buttons on his coat.
Hey, you! Shrimp!
A small voice came suddenly, accompanied by the pitter-pattering of feet quickly approaching him. A familiar face came into view. It was the rude rat kid from before.
You're the one with the phony ticket, ain't you?
The face the boy must have been giving the rat kid somehow prompted him to prod further.
I saw the guy tell you it was fake.
He continued, almost accusatory. A thought then occurred to the pointy hat boy, and he found himself asking a question before he could think better of it.
Are you Alleyway Jack?
The rat kid looked offended.
Do I look like that loser?
He spat, his hands on his hips. Then he relaxed, brightening, an impish smile stretching across his face.
But I'll let you in to see the show if you become my slave. Well, what do you say?
The boy in the tall hat twiddled his thumbs, shifting his gaze away from the rat kid, who stood far too close to him.
Well,
he began, timidly.
All right.
Awesome!
The rat kid cheered.
Now for your first assignment. You go stand over there and see if anyone's coming.
The rat kid pointed towards the opening of the alleyway with his tiny clawed hand. His sense of urgency prompted the other boy to swiftly obey him, posting himself firmly at the entrance. He heard the rat kid shuffling across the cobblestone behind him. He wondered what he was planning.
Is it all clear?
The rat kid called. The boy did not see anyone coming their way. He turned around, nodding.
Awesome!
The rat kid answered, grabbing the wooden ladder which lay against the wall.
Engage according to mission parameters.
He teetered unsteadily as he lifted the ladder, nearly twice his size, above his head.
Let's go!
He exclaimed, racing down the alleyway with the other boy. The boy followed the rat kid through a winding road to a tower with stained glass windows that housed a very tall ladder leading up to a huge brass bell.
Now, we're gonna climb up this tower.
He started.
It's pretty dangerous. You go first!
Okay.
The pointy hat boy responded, nervous, but feeling like he had little choice in the matter. He waddled up to the ladder and gripped the side of it. Just as he moved to step onto the first rung, he heard a small mewing sound and the aggressive flapping of wings. He looked up, right as a pink puffball landed on his face, knocking him over. He heard the rat kid's taunting laughter from behind him.
What the heck was that?
The furry little creature jumped off of the boy, flapping its tiny bat wings.
Sorry about that, Capo.
It chirped.
That's Koopo. He's a Moogle.
The rat kid clarified. The Moogle nodded and chirped in affirmation.
Capo.
This is slave number 1.
The rat kid continued.
Try to get along, okay?
Capo, pleased to meet you.
All right.
The rat kid interrupted.
Time for some upward mobility.
He strode over to the tall ladder, securing the one he had brought with him around his right arm. The Moogle and the boy both watched him disappear up the tower, surprised at how effortlessly he handled the extra weight.
Okay.
A voice echoed from inside the tower.
Come on up now, slave.
The boy walked over to the ladder and gripped one of the bars in his red glove. He stared skyward and saw the silhouette of the rat kid, looking quite small, glaring down at him from a keyhole of light. With a trembling hand, he took a step, focusing squarely on the wood grain of each rung as he climbed.
All right, the play's gonna start if we don't hurry.
The rat kid called, turning for the rooftops, leaving the boy no time to catch his breath upon reaching the top of the tower. The boy followed the sound of the other child's footsteps as he walked, not trusting himself to look up as he made his way across the uneven clay tiles. Then, suddenly, the tiles ended, leaving only 2 narrow beams of wood connecting the 2 rooftops. The drop below was dizzying. He found himself fidgeting with his coat buttons again.
Come on, get over here.
The boy didn't answer.
Let me guess. You're afraid of heights, aren't you? It's okay.
He reassured him.
Just pretend you're on the ground.
The boy swallowed hard.
Just like on the ground,
he told himself in repetition, all the while silently begging his legs to stop shaking. When he felt the ground level out beneath his feet again, he sighed in relief. But the rat kid was far too distracted to care.
Come on already,
he shouted.
We're running out of time.
After a few moments, the rat kid turned sharply to face the boy, nearly knocking him over with the ladder he carried.
Oh yeah,
he began.
I almost forgot. I don't even know your name.
My name's Vivi.
Vivi, huh? Kind of funny name.
He paused.
My name's Puck. Pleased to meet you,
he said with a toothy grin. As they hopped over to the next rooftop, and the next, and the next, Vivi began to wonder just where Puck was taking him, until he stopped at a small wooden deck overlooking an opening in a stone wall.
Phew, you finally made it,
he announced, bridging the gap between the rooftop and the deck with his ladder.
After this wall, we'll be inside the castle.
Vivi scampered after him as he vanished behind the stone wall.
Wow,
Vivi thought, as they slipped easily beneath a crowd of very posh-looking nobles. Among the pastel gowns and silk ribbons, the prestigious suits and matching bow ties, Vivi and Puck certainly seemed out of place, but they were so quick and nimble that they managed to sneak behind a cluster of chairs, eyeing the brightly lit stage through the gaps. Queen Braun was not a pretty woman. This was an understatement. She had a bright blue face that was round like a toad, with bulging eyes that gleamed wickedly from under the shadow of her heavy golden crown that doubled as a complicated ornament for her puffy, straw-like hair. Everything about her was gaudy, from her tacky, mismatched robes to her off-white fur collar, to the pinkish-purple makeup covering more of her face than it should have. It was a wonder how her daughter, who sat only a foot or so away, could be as beautiful, and not blue, as she was. The princess had dense brown hair that was so clean and glossy it reflected the stage lights. She had a narrow, pointed jaw and deep, sad eyes framed by a thick mass of eyelashes. Princess Garnet sighed and bowed her head, clearly not as pleased with this whole production as her mother, who by contrast was already out of her seat, fan fluttering in excitement as she peered over the ledge from which they sat. In the corner, to her right, stood Adalbert Steiner, captain of the Knights of Pluto. With his feet firmly planted and his tall sword pointing upward proudly, he seemed almost statuesque, each inch of him decked out in a hefty plate of steel. He glanced quickly at the princess, a pompous smile stretching across his broad face. The stage shuddered, silencing the murmuring crowd, before fireworks sprang from the ground and cheers erupted from the audience. The stage began to rise, doubling in size. Decorative pillars erupted from the very base of the Prima Vista. As if by magic, a full band appeared with the rising floor, followed by a spray of fireworks that revealed an even larger stage underneath. Steiner stood, beaming at the bedazzling display. Certainly, this had already far outdone the mundane vestiges of last year's performance.
Good timing, too,
he thought, his eyes flickering back to the princess. She remained with her head still bowed, eyes closed and eyebrows pinched, a frown tugging on the corners of her lips. Steiner felt his face fall at the sight of her dismay. A low voice began from the stage.
Ladies and gentlemen.
It was Baku, the theater productions leader, standing in the spotlight of the small stage below. He had donned a long red and green robe with a bit of gold and fur trim around the edges. A petite crown was nestled between his pointed pink ears. His pig snout twitched as he waved a gloved hand at the audience.
Tonight's performance is a story that takes place long, long ago. Our heroine, Princess Cornelia, is torn from her lover Marcus. She attempts to flee the castle, only to be captured by her father, King Leo. When our story begins, Marcus, having heard of this, crosses swords with the king. And now, Your Royal Majesty, Queen Braun, and Your Highness, Princess Garnet, noble ladies, lords, and rooftop viewers, Tantalus Theatre Troupe proudly presents I Want to Be Your Canary.
He took a dramatic bow as the band above him bellowed out a foreboding piece. The spotlight dimmed, and the stage was plunged into blackness. Blank, still backstage, called out in his loudest voice,
Bereft of father, bereft of mother, Marcus, thou hast lost even thy love.
Fortune have escaped thee.
Cinna followed.
For what end should thou live?
Zidane pulled a meager sword from the sheath at his right.
For the sake of our friend, let us bury our steel into the heart of the wretched King Leo.
The three of them plunged forward as the curtain rolled open. Great sparks of light shot up at the backsplash, accompanied by instruments that mimicked the sound of a thunderstorm. They rounded on Baku, resplendent in his role as King Leo, flanked by two henchmen in leather masks.
We shall back thee, kinsman.
Blake called to Marcus.
Pray, sheathe thy swords. This villain is mine alone.
Nay, kinsman,
Cinna responded.
for I too have lost a brother to this fiend.
The king brandished his fists in anger.
What ho? Out, vermin! Away! Thou darest bear thy sword before thy king? All who stand in my way will be crushed.
Treacherous Leo, my kinsman's suffering shall not be in vain.
Zidane spat.
For I shall instruct thee in his incomparable pain.
In that moment, Zidane sped toward Baku, the rest of the troop close at his heels. They engaged in mock battle, clashing swords emphatically and dodging blows with a finesse of expertise. Marcus then delivered the finishing blow to Baku, pretending to spear him through his side, causing Baku to cry out in pain and stagger backwards. The troop stepped away, still crouching defensively, watching as Baku keeled over and crept toward the staircase to the right of the stage. He clutched his side, groaning, making his way to the balcony above.
Thou hast not seen the last of me, Marcus.
He warned from the landing.
Come back here!
Zidane yelled, gripping his sword tighter and barreling for stage right. Blank stepped to block him.
Out of the way!
Zidane snarled, swiping his sword at the air. Blank avoided it, backflipping up a few stairs.
Consider this, Zidane. If Prince Schneider were to marry Princess Cornelia, peace would reign over both their kingdoms.
Zidane's eyebrows furrowed as he shook his head roughly.
'Tis foolishness! If all were so easy, why none would suffer in this world?
Blank turned for the landing above the stairs, Zidane racing him up. Blank faced Zidane, a playful glimmer in his eyes, too subtle for the rapt audience to see. He lunged with his sword, diving low at the blonde boy, who leapt right over it, following with a swing of his own. The pair, both having thoroughly memorized these moves, enacted their deadly dance of blades, each striving to gain the upper hand and a flurry of slashes. Jumping from the balcony, Blink landed easily on the main stage below. He took off through the crowd with Zidane in hot pursuit, nearly tripping Marcus in the process.
Dodge this!
Stopping in front of the barricade, behind which the nobles sat, Blank turned on Zidane.
On guard!
He called.
Expect no quarter from me!
Zidane aimed his sword at him again. The crowd cheered and clapped, enthralled by the display. Zidane beamed and briefly allowed a grin to play on his lips as he threw himself into the air, twirling before clashing swords with Blank. Blink sneered as Zidane met him, his voice barely above a whisper. At that, Zidane couldn't help but laugh as he pulled his sword back, sizing up his opponent with feigned vigor. With his eyes darting to the right of Blank, Zidane gave a purposeful flick of his tail. Blank got the hint.
We shall finish this later.
He turned, darting back down the walkway. They both ran, disappearing around a stone wall as the lights dimmed and the crowd slowly became quiet again, turning their attention back to the main stage.
Nice segue.
Blank huffed, catching his breath as they slid behind a statue in the shadowy hallway.
Although, I wish we had rehearsed that last part before today.
Yeah. Would it have killed the boss to give us a map of the castle?
Zidane snorted before leaning his prop sword against the wall. They both peered out into the hallway. It was dark and quiet, save for the murmuring of conversation down the corridor.
Gods.
Blank whispered. Zidane nodded. They both crept out from their hiding place, sidling the wall, until two castle guards, outfitted in plates of steel, came into view. The guards were chatting idly, completely unaware of what awaited them around the bend. Zidane could barely make out Blank's face beside him, glowing in the dim firelight. He put a finger to his lips, smiling as he backed himself against the wall opposite Blank. He started to count down, silently, mouthing the words.
3, 2, 1.
At once, they both lurched forward, catching the guards from behind, arms wrapping tightly around their necks. The clanking of metal and shallow choking noises could be heard as the guards struggled in their shock before succumbing and slumping helplessly onto the floor.
Ugh, this thing stinks.
Zidane groaned, tossing the guard's helmet to the side.
Hasn't this guy ever heard of a bath?
Both Blank and Zidane stood clad in the guard's armor. A few feet away, two men lay unconscious in their undergarments, pushed up against a wall.
Yeah, my helmet totally reeks.
Blank agreed.
My arm is way too big and my back's real itchy. Oh, the boot's so wet and my gloves are all slimy.
Blank started to turn his pockets inside out, food crumbs spilling out.
Okay. I get the picture,
Zidane said, rolling his eyes. He put his hands on his hips, looking at Blank expectantly.
You still have them, right?
Zidane motioned to a jar, poking out from inside Blank's oversized pants pocket. Blank clasped his hand over the lid, narrowing his eyes slightly at his friend.
Don't worry about me. I won't screw up,
he assured him. Zidane started towards the door, watching for passers-by in the hall. He could see a wide stone staircase before him and hear the band playing softly upstairs, the sound distant in the spacious foyer. Blank moved beside him.
All right. They should be upstairs on the balcony overlooking the stage. The interlude is coming up, which means there'll be a cart somewhere nearby with drinks for the royal family. I'll pour the sleeping potion into their tea. After they've drank it, we'll have to act fast and take their guards out, quietly, before they have time to react.
Right,
Blank whispered back, pushing his headband up slightly, before they both slid out into the large hall. As they crept up the long staircase, a thunderous roar could be heard from the audience just outside.
Uh-oh. Sounds like the scene when Marcus sneaks into Cornelia's chamber is about to start.
Blank said in a hushed voice.
We've got to act fast.
Zidane narrowed his eyes, hugging the cold railing as they rounded the top of the large staircase, the noise from outside growing ever louder as they climbed. However, just as the stone tile landing of the second floor came into view, Zidane heard a heavy thudding sound to the left of him that had him shrinking back behind the wide banister. He put his arm out, blocking Blank from proceeding, as he followed the sight of a petite shadow skirting across the floor above.
Wait. Someone's coming,
he whispered. The figure was obscured in shadow, thanks to a single candlelit chandelier above them. They seemed to be moving rather slowly, carefully, as if not to disturb the silence of the room. He leaned closer, daringly, peering around the railing. The figure was quite small indeed. They wore a long white cloak, patterned sparsely with bright red diamonds near the waist where it was cinched in by a matching belt. He could see the outline of their narrow legs, extending from beneath the oversized garment they wore on top, ending in a pair of ruby red, short-heeled boots.
A woman.
Zidane silently corrected himself. He felt his unruly tail twitch from within his baggy pant leg. Something strange seemed to possess him then, causing him to stand upright and move toward her in a kind of heady trance. She gasped, stepping backward as Zidane suddenly approached her in the dark. A halo of candlelight came over her face, illuminating it in a warm amber glow. Her eyes were full and dark, catching each flicker of light like the water's surface to the night sky. Her eyelashes, delicately curled, cast a spider-like shadow across her high cheekbones. Her lips, which appeared full and soft, were parted slightly beneath a cute and slender nose. Though her face appeared contorted in surprise, Zidane's breath left him momentarily at the sight of her. His mind seemed to wander, and he found his kneecaps buckling.
Would you please let me pass?
The girl's voice came, softly, with a tinge of discernment. Without thinking, Zidane obliged, stepping backward narrowly. She broke eye contact with him, dipping her face beneath her hood and a veil of fine dark hair. As if being broken from a spell, Zidane came back to himself, remembering where he was and what he was doing. A jolt raced up his spine, and instantly he stepped in front of her again.
Hold on a sec,
he blurted out. She glanced up at him, quickly diffusing an emotion from her face.
Haven't we met before?
Zidane continued, straightening his posture and tilting his head inquisitively. Her face briefly grew pensive, and then mildly agitated.
No, I do not know you,
she responded in a low voice. Zidane crossed his arms and bit his lower lip, feeling his trademark smirk teasing at the edge of his mouth. A familiar tightening swelled in his chest as he walked around her, his eyes memorizing her shape.
Maybe you're right,
he murmured, circling back around to her front. She followed his every movement defensively, attempting to read him.
I'd never let someone as pretty as you get away.
Her gaze wavered slightly, as color bloomed demurely under her cheeks.
Zidane!
A voice spat from across the hall, causing them both to flinch in response. He looked to the shadows and saw Blank, kneeling by the staircase, wearing a hard expression. However, before Zidane had time to react, the girl before him shoved roughly against his chest, and he staggered backwards.
I must go,
she exclaimed, pushing through him and barreling down the stairs past Blank.
Hey, who the heck was that?
Blank asked, grabbing Zidane by the arm as he started after her.
That was the princess.
Zidane hissed, taking his arm back.
Come on!
Are you serious?
Blank called from behind him. Zidane's heart was thudding heavily in his chest. Whether from nerves or excitement, he couldn't tell. All he knew was that he couldn't let her slip away. After all, they had a princess to kidnap.